Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? We're good? Okay, cool. Welcome to our first panel of the morning. Today, we'll be talking about leadership in high-pressure situations. So, it's one thing to think about a leader of Roy Williams leading his team to multiple national championships, or Mark Few leading the Gonzaga Bulldogs to their 15th straight second round tournament bid. But it's another thing to talk about leadership in these really life or death or high pressure situations. So today we have Rob Lowe, the BU police chief, with us. We have General Dennis Vai, a retired 4-star Army general, and also the executive vice president of Booz Allen Hamilton. The third member of our panel is Dr. Tanesha Beckford. She's a senior emergency medicine resident with Boston Medical Center. So we'll start out with each of our panelists just introducing themselves, telling us what they do, and then who they are and what their definition of leadership is. So Rob, do you mind starting with that?
Sure. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Rob Lowe, and I am the Boston University Police Chief. I have been here for about 7 months, and I can tell you that I don't know anything about high pressure situations. Before I joined BUPD, I was with the Cambridge Police Department just across the river for 22 years. In my role there, I was the operations superintendent and oversaw the majority of operations day to day, about 200 of the 300 officers that are assigned to that agency. So worked a lot with on marginalized populations, and again, the majority of the resources assigned to the police department there. Again, I joined BUPD last August, and it has been one challenge after another, and just really grateful to be a part of this community. When I think about leadership in the way I define it, so in 2020, our world's changed because of the COVID pandemic, right? And then shortly after that, George Floyd was killed, and it turned the policing profession on its head. And so we had to adjust to those challenges as well. Right before I joined BUPD, our officers were involved in a fatal officer-involved shooting, which resurfaced the tensions between the police and the community in the city of Cambridge. And so as I think about this definition of leadership and how I define it, there were a couple of themes that emerged when I reflected on my past 4 years in this profession. And the first one for me is just an intentional focus on officer wellness and safety, making sure that we're creating an environment that is healthy, where our officers can thrive. And so for me, that was one of the themes that kind of stood out to me. Another one was this idea of being adaptable. In policing, our landscape continues to change, and so we have to be flexible and make sure that we're able to meet the demands of the community. And so adaptability is something that's really important to me in terms of a leadership perspective. I would also say resiliency. Our officers have had to be very resilient over the past 4 years. These critical incidents that we're responding to are protracted. And so making sure that we're providing our officers with resources for an extended period of time is something that's really important and a priority for my leadership perspective as well. So I will leave my comments there. I want to make sure that my distinguished panelists have opportunities to speak, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Thank you.
Well, good morning. My name is Dennis Vai, and I'm certainly honored to be here with all of you this morning as well. And I've been in very secure positions before, but I don't think I could be more secure than having the police right in front of me. But I'm honored to be part of these great panelists as well. I want to first of all thank Dean Chart for reaching out to me. I'm a Boston University alum, and I came to the Boston University through an overseas extension program when I was stationed in Naples, Italy. This was in 1984 to 86. Boston University had an extension program to obtain your master's degree program. And I entered that program, and it was wonderful. And that was my introduction to the university. And then I was very fortunate to return to the university about 2 years ago to receive an alumni award. And Dean Chart, at that point in time, as we were departing, I said to him, please reach out if I can ever help you in any way. I'm always available. And so about 3 months ago, he reached out and said, remember? And so I'm very honored to be here today. Again, I'm currently an executive vice president with Booz Allen Hamilton. And I lead, I've been with Booz Allen now almost 7 years. And I lead corporate engagement on behalf of the CEO. And so that requires a lot of travel, a lot of engagement at various high-level events, senior clients across the United States and certainly overseas. Prior to joining Booz Allen, I served a full career in the United States Army, 36 years. And in my last assignment, well, I'll start at the beginning. I've been in leadership positions since I was 22 years old. I graduated from college, Virginia State University, and through the Reserve Officer Training Corps program. And my first assignment was to be in charge of 30 young men and women at 22 years of age. And I was responsible for their training, development, and deployment if we had mission requirements. And leading up until my last position, that I was blessed and fortunate at the 4-star level to lead an organization called the Army Materiel Command. And the Army Materiel Command is responsible for all logistics and global supply chain for the United States Army and the Department of Defense. And so from those 30 young soldiers at 22 to 120,000. And when I define leadership, it has evolved over time as I've come to define it as the chief has stated. And I think if I describe it today, what is leadership is really establishing and creating a positive environment where every member of your organization or every member of your team feels valued, they feel appreciated, and they feel inspired, and they feel empowered to succeed, whatever that task happens to be. And I think that's the role that a leader has today. As I look back, whether I was leading just 30 or leading 30,000, it's the same. You've got to create the type of positive environment where everyone can achieve. They feel appreciated, they feel welcomed, they feel part of the team, and they feel inspired and motivated. And if you create that environment, what I found, there's almost nothing you cannot accomplish. It doesn't matter what the career field, doesn't matter what the issue you're involved in. And I think as we watch March Madness right now, you can see it displayed with our athletes, which certainly all of you are involved in, and watching those teams compete. And how do coaches inspire them, how they inspire each other, and how they deal with not being successful on the court. And I think that takes leadership as well. So I look forward to the discussion today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Tanesha Beckford. Can you guys hear me okay? And I am a senior emergency medicine resident at Boston Medical Center. As many of you guys know, the #1 trauma center in New England. So I deal with high pressure situations on a daily basis. Outside of the hospital, I am the chair of the Emergency Medicine Resident Association for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I wore a former hat of doing that within the emergency department as the chair of the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. One of my passions is working with underserved populations that may not always have a voice. And populations that have been marginalized and intentionally marginalized, in which have high incidence of violence and have high incidence of being seen in my emergency department. So from this lens, I had a hard time really defining leadership in a sentence. And, you know, a lot of my thoughts about leadership in fact, overlap with, what you guys have heard today. And really, when I think about leadership, I think about the courage, but also the skill set to guide individuals around you in order to have a a outcome that you can really measure, but also that you as a leader are working with other people towards a common goal, right? A leader to me is someone who has vision and is able to bring that vision into reality, right? And there's a difference in being a leader from just having a leadership position, but being an effective leader, right? And making sure those outcomes come into play. I think we all know that your position does not define you as a great leader, but it does in fact bring opportunities for you to lead. And leadership, from, what I'm hearing from the other panelists, really takes practice, and that practice comes through experience. But it doesn't define you by your age, right, or your title, because I think, even being very early in my career as an emergency medicine physician and have been there for the past 4 years, I've already been able to step into leadership positions in which many of you will never have to deal with, a stab wound that comes to your trauma room, right? Or, even engaging with the police chief when it comes to a national emergency. I can't say that I am ready to go head to head with a 4-star general, but I'm working my way up to it. And, this is something that even as an emergency medicine physician takes practice. We do simulations. We think about every situation that we can possibly be in order to become better leaders. And just because I'm an emergency medicine physician has not meant that I automatically was a good leader, right? I think their leadership training, there's leadership practice, there is leadership development at every stage and every level. And even when you are the leader, you still need to be surrounded by individuals that are passionate and looking to adapt and looking to improve their leadership skills. The good thing about being a leader is also knowing your weaknesses and where you can develop over time. And I think this is why it was so hard for me to think about what leadership means, because there's so many elements to leadership that are constantly moving and constantly changing. And it is a lifelong learning experience. So I look forward to engaging with you guys and our further panelists. Thank you.
Awesome. Tanesha, staying with you, I really want to hear your stories about leadership. So if each of you could provide us an example or tell us a story that highlights the elements, it could be the tensions, decision-making processes, your vision of leadership in your domain.
So I have many stories, but I think, in thinking about our prior keynote, one thing that came up was really mental health and that focus. And I think when we think about high pressure situations for an emergency physician, we often think about, those gunshot wounds. We think about those stab wounds. We think about, the St. Patty's Day parade and what is going to come in emergently. Because they are high pressured situations. But I would say something that we often don't think about, that we've seen an increase over the past couple of years, likely because of COVID being the nidus, is really acutely decompensated psychiatric patients, in which myself as an emergency medicine physician has to deal with. And that can bring a lot of tensions, because I can tell you, I've had a patient that has been brought in by police from the field who, has been really identified as someone who is harmful to not only themselves, but as others, right? I had a patient that came in that had injured staff, and injured, police in the field. And really, my goal was to make sure that everyone was safe, but also to make sure that this patient got everything that they needed. When I received more, so I came in the morning after the patient had already been there for a couple of hours. And as you can imagine, getting sign out from your colleagues saying that this has been a patient that has destroyed the emergency department, has broken several beds, has hit several nurses, and has even tried to attack the doctor, but has not seen a psychiatrist. You can imagine the tension that I received walking in, knowing that, okay, so the patient hasn't gotten what they needed, right? Which is a psychiatrist. but has done so much damage within the time frame that they've been here, whether it's been intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't matter, because as a physician, I know that my goal is to make sure that the patient gets exactly what they need. But in this high pressure situation, not emergent, but high pressure, as in, you know, the nurses expect me to make sure that this patient is sedated at all times, not moving and strapped down in restraints. My colleagues have already come up with a plan to put a breathing tube in this patient and maybe get them a little bit more calm, and the pharmacist have already pulled out medications for me before I can even introduce myself to this patient. Right. And as a leader, you really have to think about your core values and think about that outcome that you're trying to achieve. So I decided to step away from everyone else's delegation of what I should do. And I just went in to meet the patient. I started fresh, right? Because we also have to realize that as leaders, we have to be aware of our environments, but we cannot let them always dictate our first steps in leadership. I went in, met that patient. She was still strapped down to the bed. And I decided to start relationship building. Asked her what happened. Asked her if she's in any pain or if there's anything that I can do. And this patient completely opened up to me. She was staying in a shelter, was raped in the shelter, came into the emergency department for help. You know, got upset because she wasn't getting the help that she needed. Then it essentially escalated as, you know, people wanted to tie her down, give her medications, and she just had a total mistrust of the entire system. And for me, that was more information that any of my other colleagues had gotten, but was important in that relationship building, in knowing that if we can come up with an agreement, I wouldn't have to medicate you. I wouldn't have to keep you in this locked room, and I can guarantee that you can get the help that you need, which is not in the emergency department and is in a facility dealing with psychiatrists and dealing with professionals that can get you the help that you need. And this was not the initial example that I thought that I was going to share with you, because we're just coming around from St. Patrick's Day parade and I've had lots of emergent traumas to tell you about, but really one that I thought was fitting when it comes to thinking about the need in the community right now, which is mental health. When we think about the increase in suicide, when we think about the increase in decompensated psychosis, and one that is really important and very high pressured, because you will be asked, what is it that you want to do? And it can be easy to keep this patient calm for a moment, but really know that you're not addressing the needs of people, of patients and communities. So that was just a prime example of how, you know, really keeping that goal in mind and using your skill set as a leader to really create another trajectory, you know. And the other supervising doctors said, Tanesha, I am so proud of you that you did not listen to me and did not medicate this patient, because it wasn't what she needed, right? So I had this patient who had really torn up the entire emergency department the night before and was walking out cooperative and going to the psychiatric unit just from kind of recognizing what she needed in that high pressure situation. And, you know, saying, you know, maybe the nurses can't give medications, but because I've built this relationship, I'm going to give her her daily medication and I'm going to talk to her, and really stepping up. So this is just one of the things that we have to think about as leaders, particularly within our scope of leadership, and thinking about the needs of our communities and of our workers, and ensuring the greatest outcome for everyone. You know, I think I did a good job of keeping everyone safe. No one got attacked that day while I was on. So, but I also, more importantly, got the needs of the patient met.
Go ahead.
So I don't know how to follow that. As I thought about it with the question in terms of some examples, and naturally over my long career, I have many as well. But I'm gonna take us a little bit different direction. And one situation that I was in, every position I had was high stress. I just learned to adapt over time. but I had reached the pinnacle of my career in the military, what I thought was the pinnacle of my career. I was in the information technology sector in military communications. And so I interviewed and was selected for an assignment to the Pentagon, to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The position was the J6. And so I was a senior communications general in the Department of Defense. That was my role, working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I arrived at this position and assumed the responsibility. At that point in time, we're involved in operations ongoing around the world. It was during the time that the earthquake in Haiti took place. I remember traveling to Haiti and in today's news, what's taking place there, and just the crisis situations. But there was a crisis every day from that standpoint. 10 months into this position, where I thought was going to be my sunset position, I happened to be traveling overseas, and an announcement was made by the Secretary of Defense. And the announcement was to stand down, inactivate an organization called the Joint Forces Command, which is in Suffolk, Virginia, and the J6. And I was not aware of this announcement. My deputy phoned me overseas and asked where I was. And, was I sitting down? I thought someone maybe had passed in my family, and I was getting that type of phone call. And she asked me, had I heard the announcement, the press release? And I said, I knew about the first part of the Joint Forces Command. And she said, and the J6. I didn't know about the J6, which meant that my organization was being inactivated. I had 300 people who were assigned to my staff. And so, as you can understand the situation, I'm overseas, this announcement is made, and I've got 300 people wondering what's taking place. And so, of course, I decided that I needed to return. And my deputy asked me, well, what do you want to do right away? And I said, well, I want to have an all hands. I want to meet with my entire group. And her response was, well, sir, you don't have any talking points. And I said, I don't need any talking points. And I assembled the group when I arrived there. And the first thing I did was I apologized to them that I was not there when this announcement was made. The second thing I said is, don't worry about any of your positions. This establishment will impact me. My position will go away, but the organization and the mission requirements continue. It'll just be a realigned to another part of the staff. And third, not all decisions are final. This had happened before, twice before, and I didn't know that it would happen again, but it happened twice before. And I think, my reaction during that time, during the next 6 months or so, as we disestablished the organization, my focus wasn't on myself, which can easily be, well, what's going to happen to me? What am I going to do? And I think that not only there's a saying that characters form in crisis, and many people were watching me. I think, what was going to be my reaction? Wasn't I angry with this decision? I didn't agree with the decision, but the decision was made. And not all decisions you can control, but you do control how you respond. And I think the way that I responded, first focusing on continuing to take care of the mission requirement while taking care of my team. And we took care of all of those 300 personnel. No one lost their position. I had to pull in a couple of my deputies to get them to not focus on themselves, but focus on the mission and our employees that we had. And I think that led to the position that enabled me to go to the next assignment and be promoted. Had I responded differently, I think it would have been the end. And I would have exited the stage, and that would have been it. And it'll be fine. I would have been okay with that. So I guess what I'm saying at this point in time, how you respond in a crisis, high stress situation says a lot about your leadership characteristics, says a lot about you as a person. So when you're in a leadership role, often things will happen And as you already heard our surgeons say, your focus is on different things, not on yourself at that point in time, but people are watching and they're observing exactly how you're responding, what you're going to do. So again, that's just one example that stood out for me, because the way now hindsight looking back at it, had I reacted differently, I think one, it would have tremendously impacted negatively on the folks in the organization. And in the end, it turned out to be a positive. And by the way, after I was promoted to 4-star general, the organization was reestablished. Someone else went into the role.
I don't know how I follow that. I think my job is starting to sound pretty easy compared to. But I would share one story was a kind of a pivotal moment in my leadership journey was back in 2015. I was a lieutenant with the Cambridge Police at the time. And essentially what happened is we had a couple of athletes that were going to come to our local mall. And essentially the tickets were sold out. The athletes ended up canceling their appearance. And of course, people got upset. The 200 people that were at the mall at the time quickly became 500 people. 500 people quickly became 1,000. And I'm pretty sure you can see where this story is going to go. It ended up turning into a civil unrest event. And so it took me as the incident commander and about 100 police officers from 5 different police departments locally, and over the course of 4 hours to resolve and restore order to the community. Most of the individuals that were involved in this incident were juveniles, 15 to 18 years of age. And so anytime you have young people, it adds a lot of layers of complexity to the way you're responding to that particular incident. But very proud that the officers responded. Again, about 100 of us. We had to close the entire mall, 3 levels of this particular mall. It's a fairly large mall in the city of Cambridge. And again, we didn't have anyone injured, officers or people that we had to take into custody. But the reason why I share this story with you is because for me, that one particular incident allowed me to not only utilize my skill set, but also learn from it. And so the skills that I learned in that particular incident really developed the skills that I've used here at BU in terms of our response to the challenges that we've had here on campus. Since I joined BUPD last August, I think we're up to, I think it's 13 protests, demonstrations, sit-ins that have taken place all over campus. And so for me and our leadership team at the police department, we have a balanced approach to protests and demonstrations. We want to make sure that people can express themselves and do that in a safe way to the point where the business of the university can continue. But again, people are being safe where they are, and they're allowed to express themselves safely. And so all of that takes a lot of planning, coordination, communication, and then execution in terms of the response to make sure that are we sending too many officers to a particular incident, or do we not have enough? As a matter of fact, today, I believe we have a group that we're anticipating is going to shut down the BU Bridge this afternoon. So don't go that way if you're going home. That's going to be a lot of traffic that way. And then I don't think it's a secret that we have a group next week that's planning additional job action. And so our teams have been in constant communication around the security plans, the coordination, and the way we're going to deploy our resources to make sure that, again, people can express themselves safely, but also that the business of the university can continue to move forward. And so for me, and just reiterating some of the things that my fellow panelists said, these are all experiences that we can use because we don't have all the answers, right? And it takes a team effort to make sure that we're able to support our community in a way that's safe. And again, people that, are able to support themselves in these high pressure situations. So that would be the story that I would share.
Awesome. So one way we think about leadership, or a framework we have, is around leadership strengths. So these, I gave these to you before, but of the 4 following leadership strengths, executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking, which is your greatest strength, and why does that work for you? We'll start with Dennis.
Well, I think as I look at those 4 that you mentioned, executing, influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking, certainly I've operated across all. And when I think back in terms of operations, I think early on in my career, mid-career, that was the focus, executing from that standpoint in operations. As I became more senior in rank and position, you would often think that I could direct many things than I could. But at some point in time, it's more on influence than directing. And so I had to develop that skill set to be able to influence peers and others who did not have to follow military orders. And so I learned as I interface with especially many of our civilian leaders and civilian personnel, I had developed a skill set to be able to influence those things that I wanted to take place to go forward. Relationship building is continuous. I said there are the two most valuable assets you have are your reputation and relationships. And so being able to build a reputation or your brand over time, that's what you become known for and who you are. And I think extending and building genuine, authentic relationships throughout your career. You never know who you're sitting next to, where they'll be. And how often I've run into people that I served with 20, 30 years ago and where they are today. And so being able to build on those relationships. But I would say today for me is strategic thinking. It's leveraging all of the experiences that I've gained over a period of a variety of assignments and locations and people that I've met with and situations that I've been involved with, is now being able to see beyond from a strategic standpoint and how you can add value to an organization going forward. We know that the strategic landscape changes constantly, and especially in today's social media and this whole innovation ecosystem that we're in. And in fact, if you're not able to be strategic in your thinking and determine where those opportunities are and how you can take advantage of them and make the kind of decisions to help you grow value in your organization, you're going to lose. You're going to be behind. You'll fall behind. And so I think today that's where I think I add most value is strategic thinking. It's also in self-learning because things change so quickly, but you have, at your fingertips today, you can find anything, any information that you want to access very, very quickly. And so how are you able to look beyond in the corporate world now, beyond just the quarterly earnings? How do you look at where the organization is going to be 3 to 5 years from now? How do you lay the foundation and build upon that? And I think that's what I bring today and what and why it works for me in terms of the role that I play today.
Great. Go ahead.
I think for me, it's hands down the relationship building. At the onset of the COVID pandemic, one of my responsibilities was to join a cross-sector team to convert a high school into an emergency temporary shelter for our unhoused individuals in the city. It was an incredible project. We served between 50 to 60 people each day, 24/7. Really impactful work, something I'm very proud of. But all that to say, in those moments when we didn't know much about COVID at the time, there were a lot of needs that had to have been met. And there was no way that I could have done that without having those relationships established before that emergency happened. And so when I needed PPE or whatever the issue was, I could call partners throughout the community to get that resource to that facility to help serve those people that were in need. And so for me, the relationship is definitely critical to the work that we do in terms of serving our community and keeping people safe. I would say here at BU, as we continue to see challenges around Israel-Hamas conflict, meeting with student groups throughout the university to have conversations about how can you express yourself in a safe way where you're not also violating policy and putting yourself in a situation that could have lifelong negative impacts on your career is really important. And again, when you're dealing with younger people, it adds another layer of complexity because, we all know that, brains aren't formed until, we're 24 years old and people, our young people are going to make mistakes that young people make, right? And so how, as a police department, can we support our young folks in those moments when they make those mistakes, lift them back up on their feet and help move them forward? And so sitting with different community groups here on campus, student groups, cross-sector partners has been really important in terms of some more, supporting safety around protests and demonstrations. And for me, it's just been really critical for our success here at the UP.
Similarly for me, I actually think one of my greatest strengths as a leader is relationship building, not so much having the opportunity to create a foundation of relationships, because if you enter the ED today, it's your first time seeing me, but somehow within that short time frame, I do have to focus on building a relationship so that we can establish trust as your provider in order to take care of you, right? So I see patients at their either most critically ill state, most vulnerable state, right? Most people will tell you or tell me, hey, I didn't want to come into the emergency department today, right? So I've already hit a wall and a barrier most of the time when I've met individuals who come into the emergency department. So using that skill of really meeting people where they are, listening to them, or just taking care of their emergent need if they are unable to speak with me in that moment. And I think through relationship building, I've had my greatest success and also had my greatest opportunities for continued leadership. It's through relationship building and being involved in which I'm sitting in front of you guys today. So I think knowing that my position as an emergency medicine physician and dealing with the critically ill comes with this platform of being able to create a relationship through trust. Relationship building has to really be at the forefront of what I do, just because the community doesn't really have the best foresight of what the emergency medicine can provide, and really seek it at the tail end of their healthcare. Right. I like to say that the emergency department is the front line, but also it's the back door of people who really want to seek care. They enter the emergency department at last resort or when they have no choice. So knowing that I'm already met with some resistance, not all, but some resistance, really knowing that despite having a goal in mind to making sure that I can strategically plan and make sure that patients have a safe outcome, I have to put those things aside and make sure that relationship building is really the thing that I'm focused on, particularly in order to get anything done, right? Because if I'm relationship building and a patient tells me, no, I don't want to do that, but you are concerned for, a ruptured appendicitis and you're saying that you need to go to the OR sooner rather than later, and I want to start these antibiotics, and they're not really understanding you, those things that you're thinking about, 5 to 10 steps down the lane are not going to be accomplished if you cannot meet patients where they are and meet people at their level of hesitancy and figure out how you can really tap into them so that you can get them the care that they need. So I think even in seeing all of those things, I thought about, execution and strategic planning and all these things are very important. But I think as a provider that is in charge of people's lives, really my guiding force is making sure that I build those relationships and continue to build them as, I exit the emergency department and work with other.
So there's lots of people in the room that are leaders in their own right or training other people to be leaders. So can you tell us some tangible strategies that you utilize for leading in high pressure or for some of you, potentially life or death situations? Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So I would say for me, and this process is continuous, right? So for me, when I'm in a high pressure situation, is continuously scanning the environment and seeing what those threats are. Then from there, analyzing the particular issue that you're responding to, and then obviously responding to it. And then after that, just a continuous assessment of what's taken place. And so again, that's a continuous model that I use, but also at the same time, putting a lot of energy and effort into the prevention piece. Normally, when you look at a critical incident, there were some signs that took place before that critical incident took place that typically weren't either flagged or communicated to where they needed to go, and which led to that particular incident. And so I'm finding myself more now spending time and energy building early warning systems or making sure that we're spending energy on having conversations about preventing these incidents from happening. And so I think sometimes we focus so much on the actual event itself that sometimes we lose track of other things that we could be doing to prevent the critical incident from happening in the first place. And so that for a police department is really important because obviously you could have life and death consequences. You know, one of the things that comes to my mind before I joined PPD, and I talked about that one of our officers was involved in a fatal involved shooting, responded to a person that was in mental health crisis, right? So as you look at that whole call for service, where there are opportunities for us to de-escalate or disengage with that person to prevent that situation from happening. And so that's the model that I use when I'm in the middle of a crisis. But beyond that, I think there's also opportunities to think about energies that we could be putting into to prevent that crisis from happening. And then also after the incident happens, I think there's always an opportunity to reflect. And so anytime we have an opportunity to come together as a team after a critical incident happens, we do that because for us, it makes us a better team in terms of moving forward onto the next challenge when we can learn what we did well and where our opportunities for growth are. So that would be something that I would offer.
Thanks.
I think the chief has an excellent framework, and I think you'll probably hear similarities. As I mentioned previously, because I served in high-stress assignments over and over, just like an athlete, you become pretty good, at least comfortable operating. Doesn't mean you have all the answers, but you're able to, I always say every crisis is not a crisis. Over time, there are different levels of crisis that may take place. And so over a period of time, you become accustomed to operating in that environment. And I know the surgeon will absolutely go into that because she faces that every day. And so what I found is most important when you're in a crisis situation, if you're in a leadership role, maintain focus on remaining calm. Everyone focuses on the leader when a crisis situation takes place, and they're going to follow your lead. And so when that situation takes place, it doesn't mean that, I mean, you're human. You're going to have reactions and thoughts that you have, but keep those internal and maintain focus on being calm. As the chief has stated, assessing the situation, taking the information in, and understanding what is taking place at that point in time. Second is don't be so quick to make a decision right away. Different again, medical problem where you got to make those quick decisions, but make a decision when it's necessary to make the decision. That's what I found. Don't be premature in that. You don't want to be late, but not necessarily that you have to act right away. When you face a situation, take time to assess, think it through thoroughly. Third is get input from all others who are supporting you. And so you have your team that you work with, you have your leaders that you work with, managers. And first of all, really get to know them because it's in crisis situations, you'll find out, I didn't know that this person had this experience in this area, that they can provide advice, and make sure you're maintaining your openness to receive that advice and input, because that will help you even better assess the situation and determine the action that you have to take. And then last, understand that it's going to evolve. Every situation is going to evolve over time. It's going to look differently 12 hours from now, 2 days from now. And so being able to constantly understand that it's going to evolve and then allow your thinking and your reaction to evolve along with it, and understanding the next steps you need to take in the appropriate time to do so.
I certainly want to take the time to echo a lot of what the prior panelists talked about, because I think no matter how we really come up with our framework, it really kind of has the same underlying themes of being a leader in high pressure situations. I think one of the things that was already highlighted that when you're constantly in these high pressure situations, you often get desensitized to it. So that means that my threshold for dealing with high stress situations may look a lot different than your threshold, right? I may jump into a situation where, we have a mass casualty, out from a parade, where your initial instinct might be to run. But that isn't because you don't have the skill set to do so in that moment. It's just because I've already faced these situations and I'm used to high pressure situations. And a lot of these situations come with conflict, they come with pressure. Not everyone will necessarily agree with your strategy or your framework. And being a leader means standing in your framework because you know that there's a goal in mind and there's an outcome in mind. So for me, there are 4 easy steps. Well, I shouldn't say easy. There are 4 steps that I tend to think about when it just comes to problem solving. And the first thing that was echoed before is to stop. So I think a decision to do nothing in this moment is a decision. Just because that gives you the time to assess what is going on around you. It gives you the time to think about what is the first initial step that you need to do. Triaging is something that we use very frequently in the emergency department. As you can imagine, when you have a waiting room filled with 70 people, right, you have to think about, okay, well, who is sick and who is not sick and who's everyone in between, right? The in-between is technically the harder ones. So I think about just stopping and assessing your environment and assessing the things around you. So that's usually my first step. My second step is really understanding the perspectives of the people in this high pressured situation. And then understanding my perspective and if it's the same or if it's different. Because perspective is going to allow you to know which direction in which you're going to take your initial step, right? Your initial step may be spending some time getting on the same understanding or on the same perspective in order to move on to your first actionable step, right? So I think first stopping and then understanding the perspectives around you. Third, is remembering the common goal or the outcome in which you want to accomplish. Because as a leader, you do have something that you need to make sure that is established, right? Something that you need to execute. From my perspective, it's usually a patient goal or patient-centered outcome, whether it be, get this patient to the OR, get this patient discharged home so that they could be with their family, which is what I like to do. Get this patient the care that they need in the example I provided before with the psychiatric help that patient needed, right? So remembering that common goal is something that we often forget in high pressured situations because it is so chaotic, right? So you are dealing with all these multiple steps in between that you forget that like, hey, well, I need to make sure that, these people get the care that they need at the end of the day because you're managing security, you're talking to BU police, you're sitting with the 4-star general, and so there's so many moving parts that it sounds very simple, but it's very easy to forget if you do not remember that common goal. And then fourth is really resetting and being adaptable. And this is where the execution comes into play, right? Because you've spent time understanding your environment, understanding the perspectives, and really remembering the common goal. And now you're resetting in order to make sure that your first step is the best possible step for your patient, for the safety of your colleagues, and for every person that is really in this environment with you. And I think those are the 4 key steps that I try to use in high pressure situations. I think things that help me improve on high pressure situations is really using an algorithm. When I have a sick patient, I think about A, B, C, D, airway, breathing, circulation. Do they have a disability? And every single time that patient comes in with that distress, no matter what it is, I think about that algorithm each time after I've done my initial 4 steps of stopping, assessing the situation, and being ready to execute. But really having those strategic steps can help you to not be distracted by all the noise that is going to be around you in a high pressured situation. And I think it's very important that we kind of all have our own framework and our own strategy in order to tackle these.
If I could just add one more, because as I'm listening to both the panelists, is also being highly confident in your career field. When you're handling a stressful situation, if you're highly competent and very good at what you do, and you never reach that pinnacle, you have to constantly improve your craft. But if you're very good at what you do, that competency gives you the confidence to remain calm in the situation at that point in time. So just to add, as I'm listening both to the chief and the surgeon here, in the roles they lead day to day, much different than I lead today, it's the competency that they bring to their area of focus today. And I think that's how they're very effective in what they do. And I think that's key to leadership.
Great. We have time for one, maybe two audience questions. Do we have a mic going around?
Well, thank you all for your panel discussion. I really appreciated it. You all talked about leading individuals. And I think General Dennis, you touched on it a little bit with that last comment about working on your own craft. So I'm wondering, how do you all lead yourself? What are critical practices that you all have implemented throughout your career to take care of yourselves and flourish as individuals?
I'm happy to jump in and thank you for the question, because I think that was one of the questions that we weren't able to get to. So I appreciate that. Just on the self-care piece, because I think this is so important, and I'll be quick. I'm very proud of the policing profession that we've changed our perspective on self-care. When I was a rookie cop, I went to a pretty graphic crime scene. And when I left the crime scene that night, I was very close to quitting, because I didn't sign up for this. That's the way I was thinking at the time. And back then you couldn't talk to anybody about that. You were stigmatized. People wouldn't want to work with you because it was seen or perceived as a sign of weakness. And so I really struggled through that incident. And so it's just really great to see that now police leadership has understood that the injuries that you can't see are just as important as the injuries that you can see. I would never send a police officer out in the street with a broken knee. Why would I send an officer out in the street that's not doing well mentally, right? And so for me, sharing my story with my community and my officers to let them know that it's okay, to normalize these conversations. It's okay that you're struggling when you're being exposed to seeing things that normal people do not see. And so in terms of self-care, I lean on my support system. I try to exercise as much as I can, although it doesn't look like it. But I think it's really important to lean on your support system. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are humans as well, even in leadership positions, and that it's really important for us to practice self-care. So thank you again for that question. I appreciate it.
He's a plant. Thanks, Peter.
I can't add any additional to the chief. Just exactly, self-care is so important. And I think when you're in these high stress positions, you have to find ways to achieve balance. And I always say there's life balance, both in terms of your career, your family, significant other life, and then yourself. There are times that I want to go fishing by myself, because that allows me to have time for me and find out what it is that you need time for you. Is critically important, so that as you continue to rise in your capacity, you don't burn out, and people do burn out. And then last, beside about the mental, the whole fact that we're reducing the stigma associated with it. And in the military as well, very senior officers would never talk about it. It was just something that you didn't discuss about the challenges that you're facing. And at some point in time, we made a turn. And I'm very pleased that we have, because it was impacting in a huge, huge way, especially during the 20 years of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Multiple deployments for senior officers and they were having mentally challenged coming back and not having an outlet to be able to address. So achieving balance is so critically important for yourself and for your organization.
I would echo the thoughts of my other panelists. I definitely don't want to be redundant, but I think it's a well-known fact that healthcare workers are very bad at taking care of themselves, just because we put so much of our life's work into taking care of other people. And for me, I am no athlete, but I do like to work out and play tennis. Tennis is my sport. And I do like to spend a lot of time alone to really reflect, whether that be through yoga, through meditation, through some type of, spiritual community. Those are the things that keep me whole and keep me sane. So I would employ all of you to find the thing that makes you feel whole, in order to continuously rejuvenate, and so that you can wake up in the morning and, add to your job, add to your careers, but also more importantly, add to community.
Thank you. If you didn't have a chance to answer your question, hopefully they'll stick around for a couple minutes so you can speak to them. So we'll just round out with one last question, one that you are not prepared for. So fill in the blank. Thriving is in one or two or a couple words.
For me, the things that keep me up at night. So thriving is a safe community.
Great. Thank you.
Thriving is seeing others succeed.
Thriving is embracing how far you've come and setting new goals to achieve even better.
Great. Thank you. That wraps up our time.